The SKAVEN, sometimes known as the Rat Men, the Rat Kin, or the Children of the Horned Rat, are a malevolent and diabolical race of large humanoid rat creatures that inhabits a massive intercontinental underground empire known in their tongue simply as the Under Empire, where at the very heart of Skavendom lies the horrific city of Skaven Blight, the species capital city and the probable birthplace of the Skaven race. The Skaven as a whole are a cruel, treacherous, and highly numerous species that have since spread their loathsome corruption to the farthest corners of the Warhammer world. From deep below the earth, these scavengers have built a vast empire whose military power and incomprehensible numbers has the potential to smother the kingdoms of the old world in a seething tide of violence and anarchy. It is believed by all of Skaven kind that the world is destined to be theirs, for they consider themselves the supreme master race, undeniably superior in every way to all the other races of the world. This unwavering belief stems from the promises made by their horrifically malevolent deity, known by many legendary names, but his most well-known title is that of the Horned Rat. The Horned Rat is known as the harbinger of corruption and disease, the embodiment of all things the Skaven are or ever will be, and whose worship over the Under Empire is both supreme and absolute. Within the cruel hierarchy of the Under Empire, the wishes and demands of the Horned Rat are issued and maintained by the ruthless tyranny of the Council of 13, an organization that consists of the 12 most powerful warlords within the Under Empire, whilst the 13th seat is reserved for the Horned Rat himself. It is due only to the Council's harsh tyranny that the Under Empire remains unified in some shape or form for centuries, for none could ever hope to overcome the legions of warriors the Council has under their iron-fisted rule. Out of all the mortal civilizations within the greater world, no single race, neither the ruthless barbarian tribes of the north, nor the savage greenskins of the east, can be compared in terms of instability to that of the Skaven Under Empire. The Skaven race as a whole is extremely divided, often far more divided than perhaps any other race known in existence. Such disunion and ruthless lack of cooperation stems from the Skaven's insatiable need to survive, thrive, and reign tyrannically over his brethren. To a Skaven, there is no such thing as pity, remorse, compassion, or cooperation. There is simply survival. Survival in a turbulent society that only spares those that possess the brute strength extreme cunning, and the vicious instinct to outmaneuver and kill the opposition, no matter the cost or the body count of either friend or foe. Though no matter how divided their race may be, they are nonetheless unified in a single cause, and that cause is to conquer the surfer's world and bring about the Great Ascendancy, where it is said that the horned rat's children will swarm across the face of the earth and claim all of it as their own. The origins. A few radical scholars and university professors argue endlessly over the true origins of the children of the horned rat, known simply as the SKAVEN race. Some have speculated that the SKAVEN are an offshoot or a variant of the Beastmen race, while others insist that the SKAVEN were not descended from man, but an evolved and mutated version of the normal rat. However, the most terrifying thing about this subject is that the vast majority of mankind would agree that there is no such thing as a SKAVEN, and those that dare to speak openly about such matters are often shunned by normal society and at worst burned at the stake for such heresy. SKAVEN are naturally shy, conniving, and difficult to determine, as their society and race dwell naturally in the underground tunnels far from the reach of normal observers. Along with this, SKAVEN would only surface during their most violent and inexplicable wars, from which once they are defeated or victorious, their armies would simply slump back to their tunnels and mysteriously disappear from sight for many decades afterwards. The only source scholars could gather about the first existence of the SKAVEN was mentioned in an old Talian tale called The Doom of Kavzar. The version most commonly referenced by scholars is an ancient epic poem of 13 stanzas, in either the original Talian or a translation. Copies of this tale have all been destroyed, or have since gone missing over the course of centuries. Some speculate that imperial authorities accused the text of being heretical and burned all the knowledge it held. Others believe that the SKAVEN might have even had a hand in its disappearance. The tale, however, lives on in the lands of Talia, as the story is a very common piece of folklore amongst the many farmers and commoners that live in the rolling countryside of that land. Indeed, the Talians of that land are far closer to these vermin than many would care to admit. And this old story was once foretold by their grandfathers' grandfathers in ages long ago, in a time when one of mankind's cities was truly at its pinnacle. The Doom of Kavzar. Once upon a time, long, long ago, men and dwarves lived together beneath the roof of one great city. Some said it was the oldest and greatest city in the world, and had existed before the time of the Longbeards and Madlings, built by older and wiser hands in the dawn of the world. The city lay both above and below the earth, in keeping with the nature of the populace that dwelled there. The dwarves ruled in their great halls of stone below ground, and wrestled the fruits of the rock free with their day-long toil, while the manlings reaped the fields of swaying corn that surrounded the city with a patchwork blanket of gold. The sun smiled, men laughed, and everyone was happy. One day, the men of the city decided that they should give praise to their gods for their good fortunes. They planned a temple such as the world had never seen before. In the central square, a colossal hall would be built and topped with a single cloud-piercing tower. A tower so tall it would touch the very heart of the heavens. After much planning, and with the help of the Longbeards, they set about their monumental task. Weeks became months, and months became years, and still the manlings built. Men grew old and grey working on that great temple, their sons continuing their work through summer sun and winter rain. At last, after many generations, work began on the great spire itself. Years passed, and the tower reached such a height that the manlings found it ever more difficult to take the stone up to the top. Eventually, the work slowed to a crawl, and finishing the tower seemed impossible. Then, one came among the men of the city who offered his help in their great scheme. He asked a single boon of them in return, and claimed that if they would grant him this, he would complete the tower in a single night. The manlings said to themselves, "What have we to lose?" and offered to make a bargain with the grey-clad stranger. All he wished was to add his own dedication to the gods onto the temple structure. The manlings agreed, and the bargain was struck. At dusk, the stranger entered the unfinished temple and bade the manlings to return at midnight. Clouds swept over the moons, cloaking the temple in darkness as the manlings left. All over the city, men watched and waited as the hours slipped past until, near midnight, by ones and twos, they gathered again in the temple square. The wind blew, and the clouds parted as they gazed up at the temple. It rose like an unbroken lance against the sky, pure and white. At its very peak, a great horned bell hung gleaming coldly in the moonlight. The stranger's dedication to the gods was there, but of the stranger himself there was no sign. The manlings rejoiced that their father's work was finally done. They surged forward to enter the temple. Then, at the stroke of midnight, the great bell began to toll. Once, twice, thrice. Slow, heavy waves of sound rolled across the city. 4, 5, 6 times the bell rang, like the torpid pulse of a bronze giant. 7, 8, 9. The rolling of the bell grew louder with each ring, and the manlings staggered back from the temple steps, clutching their ears. 10. 11, 12, 13. At the 13th stroke, lightning split the skies, and thunder echoed through the night. High above, the dark circle of Moor's Leap was lit by a bright flash, and all fell ominously silent. The manlings fled to their beds, frightened and puzzled by the portents they had seen. Next morning they arose to find that the darkness had come to their city. Brooding storm clouds reared above the rooftops, and such rain fell as had never been seen before. Black like ash, the rain fell and puddled in the streets, slicking the cobbles with darkly iridescent colors. At first, some of the manlings didn't worry. They waited for the rain to stop so that they might resume their work. But the rain did not stop. The winds blew stronger, and the lightning shook the high tower. Days stretched into weeks, and still the rain did not stop. Each night the bell tolled 13 times, and each morning the darkness lay across the city. The manlings became fearful and prayed to their gods. Still the rains did not stop, and the black clouds hung like a shroud over the fields of flattened corn. The manlings went to the dwarves and beseeched their help. The Longbeards were unconcerned. What matter a little rain on the surface? In the bosom of the earth all was warm and dry. Now the manlings huddled in their dwelling, fear gnawing at their hearts. They sent some of their number to faraway places to seek help, but none of them returned. Some went to the temple to pray and sacrifice their dwindling food to the gods, but they found the temple door closed to them. The rain grew heavier. Dark hailstones fell from the sky and crushed the sodden crops. The great bell tolled a death knell over the terrified city. Soon great stones cleft the heavens, rushing down like dark meteors to smash the homes of the manlings. Many sickened and died from no apparent cause, and the newborn babies of the manlings were hideously twisted. Skulking vermin devoured what little stored corn there was left, and the manlings began to starve. The manling elders went to see the dwarfs again, and this time demanded their help. They wanted to bring their folk below ground to safety. They wanted food. The Longbeards grew angry and told the manlings that the lower workings were flooded and their food had also been devoured by rats. There remained barely enough food and shelter for them and their kinsmen. They cast the manlings out of their halls and closed their doors once more. In the ruins of the city above, each day became more deadly than the last. The manlings despaired and called for succor from the dark gods, whispered the names of forgotten demon princes in the hope of salvation, but none came. Instead, the vermin returned, bigger and bolder than ever. Their slinking furred shapes infested the broken city, feasting on the fallen and pulling down the weak. Each midnight the bell tolled 13 times on high, seeming now brazen and triumphant. The Manlings lived as hunted creatures in their own city, as great rat packs roamed the streets in search of them. At last, the desperate Manlings took up such weapons as they had and beat upon the dwarves' door, threatening that if they did not emerge, they would drag them out by their beards. But no reply came from within. The Manlings took up beams and battered down the doors to reveal the tunnels below, dark and empty, stealing themselves the pitiful remnants of the city's once proud populace descended. In the ancient hall of kingship they found them. They found naught but gnawed bones and scraps of cloth, and there they saw by the dying light of their torches the myriad eyes about them, glittering like liquid midnight as the rats closed in for the kill. The Manlings stood back to back and fought for their lives, but against such implacable ferocity and countless numbers of the verminous horde, their weapons were useless. The tide of monstrous rats flowed over them one by one, dragging them down to be torn apart, the yellow chiseled teeth sinking into their soft flesh, the dark tufted mass drowning their pitiful screams with their hideous chittering.